Focus on the Community, a weekday public affairs program brought to you by Harris Regional and Swain Community Hospital. Now, today's program.
Athletes suffer from undetected heart abnormalities. AI, ECG, and wearables offer life-saving solutions. Our guest today is Mark Goddard, Vice President of Clinical Services at InfoBionic.Ai. Mark, welcome into today's program. And oftentimes on TV, we see the physique of athletes and I guess marvel at the conditioning that they go through to build up their body on the outside. But there's inside issues as well. I want to talk some about that.
For sure, Roy. It's a pleasure talking with you and being here. I think everyone that has been experienced or has some experience with sports recognizes the desire to win. And ultimately, that's the goal. And it becomes the goal for the athlete, but it also quite often is the goal for the parents or the people that are associated with the athlete. That desire to win, which is sometimes overwhelming, sometimes makes it a situation where we're not thinking about our heart and we're not thinking about maybe having an assessment prior to doing these very strenuous exercises. I think that in general, that education needs to be improved related to early assessments, especially for some of these strenuous exercise routines like you were mentioning, these people who clearly look like they've been working out dramatically and their body shows that, but what's going on inside, what's happening to the heart? And there are heart conditions that can be accelerated related to those efforts.
Well, every year, especially in the summertime, maybe during the preseason, it is not a rare occurrence anymore to hear a news report of an athlete who collapses and even dies on the field due to over-exercise, and the heart just gives out.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times in those scenarios, especially in the really, really hot weather, our body has electrolytes within it, and those electrolytes need to remain at certain levels for peak performance. And a lot of those things like potassium or magnesium can impact how the heart works. A lot of those scenarios where the athlete has that sudden cardiac event on the field is associated with, dehydration, the amount of exercise they've done leading up to it, and maybe even their size. So yeah, those things are common, and especially you see it more in the South. It's hotter down there.
In high school, whenever I was of that age and also spent some time in the Marine Corps, there was a checklist that you had to be able to do this much in order to pass the required physical fitness tests and things like that we had to pass. But we don't have any kind of a standardized test that shows what our heart is doing or maybe some of our other organs are doing.
Well, we do have some tests, but at that age, it's not something that's at the top of the mind. There are assessment tools that could rule out some of these scenarios that bring on bad results. But again, as the athlete himself or herself, they're interested in winning, and they're going to push themselves. And sometimes symptoms are even ignored because that desire to win is so strong. So you're right. There is the assessment is possible. It's just not being done. So we're not looking into it as we should. And many of the athletes, especially ones who exert energy for sustained periods at high levels, those are the ones that really, not only does everyone need an assessment initially, but those specifically, those high-stress athletes, long-duration athletes, need to be assessed over time as well, because there are changes to your heart related to exercise, and it's a structural change that can lead to rhythms that could be dangerous.
I would say that you would be a proponent that certain doctors who specializes in these kind of things should be the ones who are giving the athletes their physical to participate in sports, maybe at the high school or even at the middle school level. And then if the doctor says you don't need to be doing this, you could die on the field, or people need to listen and listen for their kids' sake, and kids need to listen too. If the doctor says you don't need to be doing this, then find something else challenging to do.
Yeah, and that does make sense to me, to have that assessment done kind of as a standard within the middle school and high schools. It's a tough one because either we would need to have, arranging a scenario where a doctor would be available for those types of assessments might be challenging, but it would be worthwhile. I think it would save lives over time.
We see on TV that people have this little white thing that they stick on their skin. I think it's called a continuous blood glucose monitor. And then, a few months ago, I had to have a pacemaker put in. And there's a device sitting beside my bed, and every so often the light comes on, and it downloads the information from that pacemaker. So those things are there. But I would say that with artificial intelligence, you probably have access to more monitoring devices that the athlete could have all the time.
I agree. I mean, that would be the ideal, actually, if we could set up a scenario where there would be a device the athlete could wear and we could do long-term monitoring. Currently, that's not really there, although like for you, you have a pacemaker and you have that monitor by your bedside. They do have devices that are just monitoring devices that are implanted similar to your pacemaker, not quite the same, but they have that transmitter as well. So there is potential for long-term monitoring for those patients that, would benefit from it. The problem with it is the way the insurance is willing to pay for it. For example, you wouldn't be able to put it in to say, hey, I want to monitor this patient for potential changes in their heart related to their strenuous activity. That wouldn't be a good reason to do it as far as insurance goes. So that's kind of another detractor for being able to actually do the things you would need to do to follow up on these patients. But there are external devices, and I work for a company that produces one that the athlete could wear during athletic events or otherwise, and they could utilize that for assessment of what's going on, maybe have that check done once every year or so as they're progressing through their athletic career. That would make sense. But again, there's no real indication for use right now. To me, that's what really needs to change. There needs to be an indication to assess these athletes that the insurance companies would pay for that assessment, just because it's not inexpensive to have those checks done. And we're not there right now, unfortunately. It's not even really a thought to get there. And I think that needs to change.
Well, maybe we can stimulate some thought with our conversation here today. And you mentioned a company, I guess our listeners could actually go to, is it InfoBionic.AI?
It is. Yeah.
Our listeners, parents, athletes, coaches, administrators, athletic directors, those people could go there and get more information, do a little homework themselves.
Absolutely. And I think they would find that the monitoring device that we use would be very suitable for someone who is an athlete and gives a little more detail than the traditional monitoring systems that are out there and available today. We have a little bit more of a focus on clinical information than some of the others do. And I think that any of your listeners that looked at our website would see that we have a very sophisticated device that provides lots of clinical detail.
All right. Anything else that we didn't cover, but you definitely want our listeners to hear from you today?
Just that if they do have young athletes in the family, keep in mind that desire to win is so darn strong. I've been in that position myself, and sometimes athletes will go beyond what they should related to that, and they should just keep that in perspective. And if at all possible, get that cardiac assessment as their athlete is ramping up their career towards an aggressive workout pattern and all those things.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for sharing this information. Hopefully we can save a life. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Roy. You too. See ya.
Bye-bye. Our guest today, Mark Goddard, Vice President of Clinical Services at InfoBionic.AI. You can get more information at that location. Again, thanks to Mark for being our guest today.